Hello my friends, and welcome to the channel for another Armored Core 6 AC showcase. This time with a build that puts together a nice selection of endgame parts that you unlock during the final chapters and after beating the game and entering New Game Plus. I call this loadout the Crimson Knight, and it's what I've been playing through New Game Plus with, so I could use all of the fancy new toys that you unlock in the last few chapters. This loadout is a medium weight biped AC packing weaponry that works at all ranges, including a long-range cannon and the Moonlight Blade, a weapon that is legendary among From Software fans. So far, I've cleared the first 3 chapters on New Game Plus with this build, and I've done all of the rank A and S arena fights with this build, so it's very capable of beating some of the hardest enemies in the story. Overall, it's focused on dealing consistent damage and repeatedly staggering enemy ACs without giving them any time to recover. To start off, I'll cover the frame parts and the internals that I'm using, then the weaponry, and finally I'll quickly go over how I set up my OS tuning to maximize damage on all of the weapons. First up, for most of the frame on this build, I'm using the AC parts that you get by completing the game with the Liberator of Rubicon ending. Starting with the headpiece, the IB CO3H HAL 826. I'll be honest, I think this headpiece is probably the coolest looking item in Armored Core 6, and thankfully it also has good stats. It doesn't have the highest AP or stability, but it has decent stats in most categories, especially system recovery, scan distance, and duration for missile lock. For the core on this frame, I'm also running the HAL 826 body piece, which once again just looks so cool. And it has a unique animation when you overheat your boosters where the back folds upwards to reveal extra venting. For stats on this core, you have solid AP and good defense, but lower stability and booster efficiency. It does make up for this, however, with a good generator output and supply modifier. So it might drain energy slightly faster, but it recovers quickly and it boosts your generator output nicely. For my arms on this build, I'm using the VP46D arms, which you unlock in Chapter 5, I believe, at the part shop. I swapped the HAL 826 arms out for these for 2 reasons. Firstly, I needed to shave a couple thousand pounds of weight off the build, and second, these arms have better weapon specialization, meaning more accurate rifle shots and more powerful melee attacks. Finally, for the legs, I'm using the HAL 826, which boast a pretty high stability number for medium weight legs and good defenses. They also have a pretty good jump distance for biped legs, so you can get into the air quickly and cross gaps without using much thruster energy. Now that I've covered the outside frame of this AC, let's take a look at the internals, starting with the booster. On this build, I'm running the BST G2/PO4 thrusters, which are specifically designed to provide good boost potential to ACs that are hitting the upper end of the medium weight category. This build is using a couple heavy weapon parts, so I needed to pick a booster that could support up to 80,000 units of weight. And as you can see here, I'm just squeezing under this booster's ideal weight of 82,000. Overall, I've had no problems with this one so far. I feel agile enough to dodge effectively, and I can stay airborne for a good amount of time. The weak points of this booster are a slower assault boost and a low melee attack boost, but that is fine for this setup because the Moonlight Blade doesn't actually need the melee attack thrust. Next up, for my generator, I'm running the VP20C, which is overall my favorite generator because it has no real downside. It has good stats in every category, and basically I end up using this thing in every build except for super lightweight ACs and heavy energy weapon builds. Finally, for my FCS in this setup, I'm running the FC008 Talbot, a well-balanced FCS that focuses on having good stats for close range, medium range, and missile guidance. This build doesn't use multi-lock and it doesn't focus on long-range combat, so the downsides of this FCS don't really affect it too much. Alright, and now on to the fun part, the weaponry of the Crimson Knight. I wanted to focus on making a build that could use some of the cool weaponry that you unlock in the late game, and I feel like I've put together a pretty good combination that allows you to keep up constant pressure while also having a few ways to pile on high amounts of burst damage after you stagger an enemy AC. For my main hand weapon, I'm running the LR037 Harris linear rifle, which is a hard-hitting semi-auto rifle that can be charged up to deliver a railgun shot that deals over 1,000 impact damage. I put this on the build so I always had a simple weapon to take down small targets, and so I had something to consistently fire at ACs while strafing and building up their impact gauge. In the left hand, this AC is wielding the Moonlight Blade, which is found in a hidden chest in the final mission of Chapter 4, right before you encounter the boss. Moonlight is no regular pulse blade. This thing actually fires out damaging waves of energy that travel a pretty good distance and damage anything that they come in contact with. If you've been using a regular pulse blade on your AC build, this thing can take some time to adjust to, because you don't need to close distance so aggressively to get off your hits. But once you get the hang of things, it becomes an incredibly useful tool to punish enemy ACs whenever they stand still for a second, and it's strong enough to take down basically every enemy that isn't a boss or a mini boss in a single hit. You can even charge up the blade and throw out one very powerful wave that hits for over 2,000 damage. Moving on to the back weapons, on my right shoulder I'm packing the VE60 SNA Stun Needle Launcher, which you received from Arquebus during the Chapter 3 boss fight against the Worm. This beast is very heavy and it takes up a lot of energy usage, but it makes up for it with high damage, high impact, a long range, and a very high direct hit modifier, meaning this is an amazing weapon to hit enemies with after you stagger them. Now, if you've looked up any boss cheesing builds, you might already know that this thing is pretty much god tier if you put 2 of them on your back, but I'm not quite going that far with it. The needle launcher is amazing for building up the ACS gauge. It hits very hard after you stagger an AC, and personally I like how much farther you can hit with it compared to something like the Songbirds, meaning you can punish enemies even when they're running away from you. And finally, we come to the last weapon on this build, the WS-5001 Soup Scatter Missile Launcher. These are the missiles used by Cinder Carla during the main story, and they fit quite well with this AC's strategy of constant pressure and consistent damage. This launcher holds 3 racks of 10 missiles each, and while it doesn't have multi-lock, you can fire it 3 times before needing to reload, meaning you can individually target 3 different enemies and fire off 3 salvos, or you can let loose 30 missiles at a single target in record time. These missiles have a fast lock-on time, meaning you can just continually fire off missile salvos and basically never let the enemy AC have any room to breathe or recover from damage. These missiles are unlocked right after you beat the Sea Spider in New Game Plus, so you'll have to use something else until then, but they are well worth the wait. Alright, now on to the final section for this video, and I just want to quickly cover my OS tuning for this build, which will maximize the damage output of the Moonlight Blade and the Stun Launcher. For system unlocks, I basically just have the Weapon Bay for convenience and the Quick Turn skill so I can pivot and hit shots with the Needle Launcher. For my core expansion, I personally like Pulse Armor, but I think this is up to personal preference. The important part here is to maximize several of the attack control sections of the OS. This AC needs to make the most out of every single hit, so this is the important stuff. I've maxed out the kinetic weapons, energy weapons, melee weapons, and direct hit damage sections of the OS tuning. The rifle and the needle launcher are kinetic damage, and the Moonlight Blade counts as both an energy weapon and a melee weapon. So maxing these all out gives us the most possible damage from each hit on every weapon. On top of this, maxing out direct hit damage just helps a lot with making the most out of every single attack against a staggered boss, especially with the Stun Needle Launcher. For my final OS tuning points, I focused on damage mitigation over the repair kit bonus. I don't have all of the New Game Plus extra arena fights done yet, but this is what I did with all of the points that I got from doing the 30 arena matches in the base game. And that basically covers it for this build. I've kept the loadout exactly like this for every fight except the Sea Spider so far, where I swapped the Moonlight Blade out for the Pile Bunker just to get max damage off on every melee hit. Aside from that though, I beat all of the S rank arenas with this, and I haven't had any troubles with mini bosses or 1v1 fights so far. I hope you enjoy the build if you try it out for yourself, and let me know what you think or any changes that you made to the build that worked out well for you. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream and Discord server down below for anyone interested, and until next time, stay safe out there everyone.